Hey everyone, this is Scott from Forgot to Grow Up. Welcome to our latest cinema chat. Today I'm chatting about Justice League Snyder Cut coming to HBO Max in 2021. So it was announced by HBO Max today that the Snyder Cut of Justice League will be coming to the HBO Max streaming service in 2021. It was confirmed by both, not just HBO Max, but also Zack Snyder and a few other people, and it was just might be just the most shocking news I've ever heard in my life. I was not ready for this. I did not expect this. I didn't think this was actually ever going to happen. So for those of you who don't know, Justice League was released a few years ago. I think it was 2017, and that came with a little bit of drama because halfway through production, Zack Snyder, who was making and producing it, had to leave due to family tragedy, and so so Justice League was taken over by Joss Whedon and finished, and came out and was not received particularly well by critics or audiences or anybody in general, except for I guess me and some of my friends. But that being said, after the release of Justice League came this campaign called #Release the Snyder Cut, and this was this online campaign of fans who wanted to see the original version, the original intended version of Justice League, which Zack Snyder had planned out when he was making the film and when he had started filming it before he had to leave again due to family tragedy. And so this news to me was one of these things that I was just never expecting. This fan campaign was one of those things I was like, okay, you guys are kind of wasting your time. They're not going to do this. If they are, they would have already said something. I was a naysayer. I can admit that. I was naysaying it. I was telling these people they're wasting their time and that the studio would never do it, that they would never go and reinvest in a movie that they already invested millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in, that did not quite make back what they wanted. But today I was proved wrong by HBO Max themselves. Now, this has been like a rumor, and people have kind of suspected ever since HBO Max was actually announced. They've been like, okay, this would be a really smart thing for them to do, which is to release the Snyder Cut on HBO Max. And some people thought, why not do it when they launch, which is actually happening later this month, which is obviously why they've announced this news. Yeah, so it's obviously why they announced this news, and so to create a little bit more buzz for the launch. But a lot of people thought that they were going to release it for the launch. So I, again, was one of these naysayers who was like, nah, it's never going to happen. They're not giving us the Snyder Cut. They're not going to waste their time with all this, spend money on something, particularly spend a lot of money to maybe just put it on HBO Max. That seemed to me a little bit like a little far-fetched. We haven't gotten a giant blockbuster out on that level of a blockbuster on but at the same time, it's a blockbuster that's already been filmed. They're re-editing it, so it's a really interesting news, really shocking. Like I said, to me, I was not expecting this. I'm very happy to hear this news. I'm always down for more Justice League and more DC and all that stuff, unless it's more Joker movie. But I'm definitely down to see another version of the Justice League. See, my problem never was with the idea of being like, oh yeah, let's get a Snyder Cut. My thing was always like, no, they're not going to do it. This is a creative versus business kind of decision, and business tends to win out in these big studios because that's who's making the decisions. The executives make the business decisions. The creatives have to kind of deal with it. That's why you get a lot of these problems when you hear about studio interference. That's the business side interfering with the creative side. So it's really interesting that this was announced, because this, to me, like I said, I've always thought that the business side is just going to keep being like, no, we already spent hundreds of millions on Justice League. We're not going to redo something with it. We're not going to maybe spend more money, because they have to spend more money to finish making it, which is another fun part I'll kind of talk about. But so yeah, it's just really great, kind of interesting news. I'm again really excited to see it, and I'm happy for all the Snyder Cut for all the Release the Snyder Cut fans who did put on that campaign and who did kind of tirelessly over the last 3 years campaign for that, because it was cited in the announcement itself by one of the HBO or Warner Brothers execs who was like, ever since I've started here, I've been getting harassed about the Snyder Cut. I'm paraphrasing obviously, but it was kind of interesting to see that they kind of acknowledged the fact that there has been this fan campaign, which is a thing that is very new. It's very new to Hollywood and just in general, the business world in general. It's only been possible because of social media and the internet and all that stuff. But it's only been in the last, with Sonic last year, and now these fan campaigns, bringing things to life that, again, I was always on the side of being like, no, business people don't listen to fans, but they finally proved me wrong, and I'm proud for HBO Max, and I'm happy for Zack Snyder, who has been talking about it a lot, like especially in the last year or so. He's been talking a lot about different conventions and stuff, and different sit-downs about what his version would have looked like, kind of keeping the Snyder Cut conversation alive. And obviously, it paid off. He's being brought back to finish editing his cut of Justice League, and so that's the part I kind of wanted to bring an interesting thing, which is kind of ties into why they didn't release this sooner, and that's because it's not done. That's one thing a lot of people, that's another one of my kind of little bit of my problems I had with the release, the Snyder Cut campaign, which was a lot of them thought that, or they at least gave the impression, I should say, that they thought that Warner Brothers had a complete Snyder Cut movie just sitting there waiting to be released, and that's not true. That part is still not true. There's still not a Snyder Cut made. What there is a whole lot of footage that Zack Snyder had filmed, hundreds of hours, or not hundreds of hours, but a lot of, I don't know what they, but more than enough hours of footage that he had filmed for his version, but he hadn't got to editing and post-production, which is the part that puts the movie together. You film it and then you put it together through editing, and particularly with superheroes, you gotta do all the visual effects after. So that's the part that I thought was really interesting about this news, and the part that kind of plays into a little bit why they didn't release it with the release of HBO Max, which is it's not done yet. Zack Snyder has to finish editing it. That's why they're waiting a year. There's no other reason to wait a whole year for this if they had it already made. It's because they have to finish, doing some visual effects for scenes that didn't make it into it. The scenes that, Zack Snyder filmed with them, on a green screen and different things, but hadn't been done. They didn't do the work of finishing those ones because they didn't make it into Josh Whedon's version, which is the version of Justice League which has been released already. So that's the part that I think, I'm not sure, is kind of, I don't know if I'm just maybe overreading into it or thinking too far ahead about this idea that a lot of people are gonna be. A lot of people are going to be like, "Oh, Iron Charter released it. Why haven't it?" It's like, because they got to finish it. They got to finish editing it. They got to put it together. They got to make a movie. Like, it's a funny thing to me because it's like, yeah, it's a year from now, or at least a year, and it's like, yeah, that's half the time it takes them to make one of these movies from scratch. So it's like, yeah, okay, they got to put it together. But that's still that doesn't really matter because it's still, we're still getting it, which is the important part. We're getting a Snyder Cut, and it's coming to HBO Max. So if you aren't already subscribed, I already am in Canada. We're lucky enough if you subscribe to HBO through Crave, you just get bumped up to HBO Max once they're releasing it. So I haven't had to do anything. I'm just waiting for it to get changed. So that being said, it is going to be a pretty big motivator for those who are already motivated to subscribe to HBO Max for all the different offerings that they already currently have. But this, I think, will be a pretty big, at least a one-time incentive for a lot of people to, sign up and check out this very exclusive, very one-off. This is, I can't think of any other time in history. Yes, we've got plenty of director's cuts and stuff like that, but this one seems a lot different than Blade Runner's 15 director's cuts and all these other movies that have had different director's cuts. This is a particularly one of these things that we're like, yeah, it's different. And so I'm really excited for this news. I'm excited for everybody who did the campaign. Thank you all for putting the work in. I didn't do any work to try and get this made. Like I said, I was a naysayer, but I'm happy that HBO, Warner Brothers, and all them have decided to do what's smart, because like I said, they've already got all the footage kicking around. They just got to do the rest of the work, the post-production, which right now during Corona, with the coronavirus and the lockdown and quarantine going on and social distancing and the restrictions going ahead that are going to come from that, it makes sense that you would be like, oh, well, we've got this property that a lot of people want that we have already filmed. We just have to do the post-production, which is mostly just people sitting in rooms by themselves editing or creating visual effects and stuff. So yeah, why not do this? So I think we're actually going to probably see a few more things like this actually going forward. Different director's cuts, different versions of movies where, maybe there was a, alternate, because in the last at least decade, we've had a lot of films where they go back and do reshoots. And it's like, okay, well, you got these reshoots, but that doesn't negate the footage they filmed to begin with. So it's interesting if we'll get more of these, we're going to go back to the first versions that we didn't change before we changed it. So I'll be curious to see if they end up doing this maybe with Batman v Superman as well, and other things, because we have gotten a director's cut, and a lot of people say that the director's cut of Batman v Superman does add a little bit more to it. I always understood the Martha thing, but yeah. So I think it'll be interesting to see if this does have an effect on the rest of Hollywood, or even HBO and Warner Brothers' strategy going forward of being like, well, if we can't do as much filming, or if it's a lot harder to do filming due to these social restrictions that we potentially have going forward in the world, that it would be really smart and advantageous for them to be like, well, we got a lot of content in a sense built up that we haven't fully utilized, and meaning that when they make a film, they make a lot. They don't only film 2 hours of footage for the most part. There are some directors who do get pretty, film only what they're going to use, but that's the kind of exception to the rule. Most of them film a lot more, and then they kind of condense it down. So I'll be curious to see if we maybe get more of these things, more Snyder Cuts in the future. But yeah, this is really, really exciting news. Really, like I said, shocking news. But I'm really excited for it. But what do you guys think of this news if you made it this far in the video? Are you excited for the release of the Snyder Cut? Are you going to be checking it out on HBO Max? Or are you as shocked as I was to hear this news? Did you expect it to never happen? Be sure to let me know in the comments below. If you're curious about my thoughts on Justice League, I'll be linking my Justice League review and my trailer reactions and stuff like that I did at the time when it did release, because that's back when I first started the channel. So those will be a fun little flashback if you wanted to check that out. But thanks again for joining me today. Sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and have a good one.